And welcome to the Tuesday, January 20th, 2026 Town of Rhinebeck Planning Board meeting. We are expecting release, but we have a quorum, so we'll begin the meeting. The agenda I posted is fine. I am going to be adding at the very end of the planning board discussion about the need for a land use transportation assessment and some discussion about potential zoning updates. That will just be a discussion at the end of the regular agenda. We have Jim's meeting notes. Does anyone have any questions, comments?
Move we approve.
I have a motion to accept. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. We have the January 6 minutes in draft form. Are there any corrections, additions?
Move we approve.
Have a motion to approve. Second.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? None. Jim, we have on here an update on the Rhinebeck Aerodrome Master Plan.
Oh, you want to do that now?
That's where it is on the agenda.
So, we have received more information. Remember, we discussed this I think it was a month ago. We discussed it when it came forward. The town of Red Hook said that they were planning an agency through seeker, and we took a look at it and said that's fine. You can take the agency. We didn't want to do that. But if you remember, the proposal at that time had the SDS and the septic system on the town of Rhinebeck side in the Rhinebeck area. They have changed that now, so there's no development proposed to the town of Rhinebeck. So everything has been pulled back onto the aerodrome property in the Red Hook side. So there is no development in the town. Technically, there's no planning board review or approvals that would be required. That said, they are still going to be utilizing roads that come through Rhinebeck, and it is still on the town line. So I think the board still should stay involved and engaged in the process. Make comments periodically if that's what you'd like to do. I can pull up that file if you'd like.
It seems like they also moved a lot of the development to the future.
Phased.
Phase, because I know you questions about the cabins, and I thought like phase 5 instead of.
Did I see that they've scheduled a public hearing? What did you send out that Kara said she would be attending the meeting?
Might have been a public hearing then, yeah.
I think it was last
Yeah,
14th.
yeah, okay. All right, anybody have any comments or questions regarding that?
You can see it about other pursuit as difference in transportation. But
No,
I think
that's
state
discussed.
law is understanding what's
Right,
happening.
they have big volumes come in and out, and that's been the case for a long time. I don't think there will be a lot of changes there. The main concerns we had were looking at, I think, putting full-time restaurant in there instead of just having food trucks come in or whatever they do. And they were going to have some on-site living areas, but that again is all things the town of Red Hook will have to deal with. I want to make sure the fire department's aware of that before we stay in government. But nothing that would result in anything. It's a major change. We'll keep an eye on what's going on.
Public hearings February 2nd, it says.
February 2nd?
Yep.
All right, so if anybody from the board is interested, I think they film in Red Hook too, don't they? So,
I think they do live too. I don't know if they do live for the planning one, but it's at 6:50.
okay. This evening we have one new application, that is Local Land Partners, Buzzell, 523 Route 308, a 10-lot subdivision, major subdivision. Good evening.
You're right. I brought 11 by 17 if anybody wants them. There's more than enough here. So good evening. My name is Craig Tripp. I'm the senior landscape architect with GPI. So this project, before our involvement with it, when it was most recently in front of the town, you guys had requested that it be looked at as a conservation subdivision plan as opposed to a traditional subdivision development. That's when we got brought on board, and so I'm here tonight to walk you through where we're at, what we prepared. There's a lot of plans in the set that we submitted, so I'll try to keep it big picture, high flying approach, but we can always dive into whatever level of detail you'd like to. Just a little bit of background real quick here. So we had a virtual meeting, I believe it was in October, if I remember correctly, where we went over the yield plan that we had developed. During that meeting, there were two comments. One of them was that you guys would really like to see also the conservation subdivision plan itself to help you kind of make the assessment of the yield plan. And after that meeting, we received a brief comment letter with a few comments on that yield plan. We've since made revisions to the yield plan based on those comments, and the first set of plans that are within this, I believe it's 12 sheets in here, the first 3 have to do with the yield plan, the remainder have to do with the conservation subdivision plan. So this first plan that you're looking at right here is and this is all just following how your code outlines what you want to see and how you want to see it. So the first plan is just a simple slope map. The areas and kind of the mustard yellow color are the slopes that are 15 to 25%. Anything that's white is below 15%, and the darker kind of brown color is 25 and above. So that's the first map, and you can see, try not to blind anybody in here. This area right here is where the existing house and barn sits on the property now. And you'll see it in later maps here, but there's a series of wetlands, streams, and the 100-foot buffers that come along with them. If you go to the next slide, please. So the second plan is what I was just alluding to. This is where you start to introduce the green home areas out of wetlands. There's actually an existing pond in this area as well. And the red areas are drainage corridors and or streams, and the blue hash with the darker blue dashed outline around those represents the buffer from those features. So you see it just that starts to already tell a little bit of a picture of what's going to remain as a potential development area of the site. Next slide. And this is the yield plan. And again, like I mentioned, we reviewed virtually the preliminary one we put together. This one represents the revised version to react to the comments that we received from you. On here, and this has to, per your code, this has to follow and meet all of the code regulations for a conventional subdivision. So that's how this would develop. What you've got on the west side here is a private road coming in to feed what's 5 lots on this side. And on this side here, you've got another private loop road that feeds an additional 6 lots on this side. Hard to see even on the screen here, but all of these little rectangles are indicators of the approximate slopes along those roads, so you guys can see that we're staying within the threshold of the code regs, which is the loop road over here is 10% or less, and I think there's one spot maybe right here where we would hit 10%, the rest is more in like the 6-ish, 4-ish range. The cul-de-sac has a different maximum slope, which is 7%, so we made sure that we didn't breach that, and we also made sure that we kept within the maximum length limits for each of those scenarios. And each of these lots have the required minimum frontage, which if I remember correctly, I think it's 240 feet for the private road scenario. And then the red, each of these locations that just represents the potential home site within this. And again, this is the yield plan. So I'm preaching to the choir here, but the purpose of the yield plan per your code is to establish the allowed number of lots for a conservation subdivision. So on here, utilizing all of the codes and regulations, we were able to come up with a total of 11 lots. That's inclusive of what would be chunked out of the overall parcel for the existing home site. So we're keeping the existing home site and adding what would effectively be 10 new lots to the development. So I guess those are the 3 plans that have to do with the yield plan. Before I get into the conservation plans, which are the rest of the set, does anybody have questions on that? So at this point?
Can you just briefly explain, we discussed it, but how you get the cul-de-sac in, because it's obviously coming across a different parcel than the one you're developing here.
On the side over here. So there's actually a 50-foot right-of-way in here, and this piece, these parcels here are also owned by Nick Puzzlefield and Parker, so obviously he's in coordinate that effort to bring that in from the side. And again, the purpose, the overarching purpose of the yield plan is purely to establish, does the board agree that we can come up legally with meeting code with 11 lots, 15 lots, 8 lots, 1, that kind of thing, just so that it's what then drives the entire rest of the process to come up with the conservation plans, how many lots you're able to incorporate. So yeah, we came up with 11 for that approach.
Anyone else, any questions so far?
With the other 2 lots that are shown not part of this plan, is there any kind of development plan for those?
These ones over here.
Yes, sir.
So, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is Nick's house.
Correct. Yes.
And then these ones I think are already,
He owns those 2.
he owns those and it's already in the process of the home.
Yeah. I'm not sure where he's at with that, but it's being right now.
I'm sorry, so Nick Buzzle, he's our client for the project. His personal home is right here on this lot. And then basically the U-shape around it is in the works for another project that's obviously adjacent but independent of this one.
So there's a parcel below that road, right?
Down here in the corner?
Up straight. What is
Same.
happening with that?
Same thing. Basically, both sides of what we're showing here at the cul-de-sac road are next.
Are they currently developed
I believe there's a house built, already approved and built on this lot.
on that list?
Correct.
And they're separate parcels? Or are they one with a proposed cul-de-sac in the middle?
They're separate parcels, so there's
Okay.
effectively 3. One parcel here, that's kind of this upside down U shape here, and next piece in the middle, and then this piece on the other side.
Okay. I'll move on.
Okay, yep, so next slide, please. I do have the backup plans in the truck if we need to bring the backup piece. On 11 by 17 in front of you, then this sheet is just, so you guys have what's called a primary constraints map and a secondary constraints map, or conservation map. And now both those maps, it's an iterative process of plans and figures that bring in increasing levels of existing conditions and site constraints that effectively back you into what your design wants to be, is kind of how it works. It's kind of a good process.
I'm really involved.
Oh, okay.
Took a second.
I don't know what to say about that one. Just let me know if I'm doing it.
Sometimes when we have the projected stuff with maps that have lots of water.
Well, if it's all right, I can talk through this when you guys looking at the 11 by 17. Basically, this first map is the primary conservation map, and what is depicted on this, not there, but on what you're looking at. It shows the wetlands, it shows the existing structures, the slopes that are over 25%, so those were the darker brown areas on that original, the first map that we're looking at. And then it gets into a little bit more of information having to do with soil type. So it shows the agricultural district areas, which we do have some around the periphery. They're zoned agricultural districts, they're not active farms, but they are technically that zone. And then you get into the prime soils with trees and hybrid soils, and those have to do with capacity, ability of the soil type to support farming activities. Is the prime soil with tree, and then hybrid soils has to do with whether it's hybrid soils and wetlands going in there. So that's effectively what that map would show. And then move on to the next one. So as I mentioned, you've got the primary conservation map, you've got the secondary conservation map. In this case, because the site is 102 acres and because there is a lot of information, we actually split the secondary conservation map into two maps just because it would just be mud. They look at it on the screen, but try to put it all in one. So we're trying to put this together in a way that makes it easiest for everybody to see what you're looking at. Yes, what you're looking at. So this first one, this one shows the slopes. So when we get into the conservation subdivision, the slope category that becomes crucial for this one is the 15 to 25. So that's what you're seeing. Yeah, these are the same yellow areas that were shown in that first map that had all three slope categories on it. So you can see all the slopes, you can see all of these circles and red pluses and smaller, various sized dots. Those represent the trees that we picked up from going out and doing a tree survey. Code requires that you identify all trees 6-inch caliper and above. What we did on this site, because again, because of the size and because of the what the project wants to be and the lay of the land, we broke it down further into additional categories for the trees. So we identified those 6-inch. We basically have trees smaller than 12-inch, trees between 13 and 23, trees 24 inches above, and then we have the last category for specimen trees, and those are these ones that are circled with the plus. So those are the big trees, 50-inch caliber trees, and those are big. So you see there are, there's a lot of woods on the site, so it's not surprising that we do have some. But that helped us, you'll see on the later plans here, that helped us figure out where to put home sites, how to work driveways, and then figure that through and around things so we avoid for sure hitting anything to do with the big ones and work around the rest of them as well. And then everything that you're seeing here for all these dashed lines, the dashed red line, those are the existing horse trails. So while our guys were out picking up the trees, they were also picking up horse trail locations and stone walls. It might be a little harder to, no, it's not. So these kind of black lines here, here, I believe there was a small stretch somewhere else on the up here, there's another one over here. So those are existing stone walls on the site as well. So same thing, later plans you see that we worked the layouts around all these elements. They're not together. So this, as I mentioned, we broke the secondary conservation map into two maps. So you can see if we put this over the top of the previous one, so this just gets into the slopes. There's a lot of information in both this chart and this one that have to do with information about those slopes. I won't bore you with the details, but it's there if you want to look through it. But it has to do with this area down here comes from the Dutchess County report that was put together by Shaky a few years back that gets into identification of soil types and what that translates to for average minimum lot sizes that they want to see and what that's all about is making sure that basic soil types, you're not going to create a lot that's too small for a septic system. Where the soil level is, you're going to need to affect your septic system work. And then this area over here is just straight up soils data from the US soil. And then we got here, you got the CO2 and that's next one. So this one is where we start to get into getting closer to what the design itself becomes based on all those constraints. So on this one, this map wants you to add a buffer associated with the slope area. So slopes that are 15 to 25, it wants to see a 50-foot buffer from. and slopes that are 25 and above, it wants 100-foot buffers from. So once you add those buffers onto this and account for the wetland buffer, the streams, the trees, all the different things from all the previous maps we looked at, you back yourself into what's left of the site for areas that make sense to try to develop and put home sites on. And that's what's represented in kind of this lime green area here, scattered around. At this point, you're not trying to determine where you're actually going to put anything. You're just trying to determine where you could put something. So like this area up here, you can see later on, we didn't put anything up here that would be practical, but it still met the requirements of the code.
Give a guess as to the size of the largest middle area.
I want to say, I don't, off the top of my head, I can tell you about that, but that's listed in that, but
The whole parcel is 100,
102.3.
and so if Jim makes it small enough, we can sort of guess, I guess. What is that, fifth of the full plan?
I would say probably that middle, just that middle
Yeah.
piece is probably in that, say, 15 to 20, somewhere in that range. I mean, I can check that, and send you guys an email with the exact components in there. It's probably another. All right, so the next sheet, this is where you start to take all that information and start seeing where can you start to fit home sites, where it makes sense to fit home sites. And again, this goes back to how the code is structured. So the sequence that the code wants to see things presented in starts with where you're going to put the houses. So that's what you're seeing right here. That. Anyway, the red rectangles are the potential home sites based on all of those parameters in the areas that are left after we back ourselves into the development areas. Oh, that works. Awesome. Thank you. Perfect. So the hatch has been turned off just for sake of clarity, but you can see this is the same line green area that we were asking about in the middle here. And within that area, we've got the existing home site and 4 additional home sites in there. On this side over here, we've got a total of 4 home sites over here, and then we've got 2 additional ones here. So even though the yield plan that we prepared based on code requirements said we could fit 11 lots, we're actually only asking for 10 as a result. And probably a little hard to see, but all of these locations for home sites avoid things like the stone walls, the trees. We place these all in, kind of tucked it into areas so that you're not going to find a house that landed directly on a 50-inch oak or anything like that.
Are you able to pick up this?
It's pretty
Yeah, we're gonna have to ask you, so we can catch you
Oh,
on
Mike.
video, if you can speak up a little
Yeah,
bit.
just talk louder in general.
Or if you wanna hold it and talk about, let's see what we can do to make it better.
So I think that pretty well takes care of that plan. We would, like I said before, we come back to any of these if you guys have additional questions. The next plan is where we start to introduce how you're going to get to the houses. So this is where we've got the driveways. So this is effectively the previous map with the addition of driveway down to show how we're going to get to each of those home sites. So the main difference between this and the yield plan, aside from the number of lots, 11 on the yield and 10 on this, is the yield plan, we were going with private roads. Once we got to this, we went to common driveways. So on the east side, we're coming in with a common driveway up through the middle, and that is able to serve a total of 6 lots, which includes the existing house that's already out there. And the code, that is the allowed by code. And then on the west side, we're coming in with a total of 2. We've got one coming in for the house that's back here, and then a common driveway to feed these 3. And all of these driveways are meeting the requirements of code as far as maximum distances. We added emergency vehicle turnarounds. there's a maximum distance of 1,200 feet before for the common driveway portion. So from here down on this one is 1,200, and then after that it splits. So one thing just to note in this area, we can vet this as we work through and get into the detailed subdivision itself. But so we laid this all out to meet code, but you can see on here when we stop at 1,200 feet, it basically forces us into having 2 stream crossings. If we can, you know, as we work forward here, we can talk with your fire access person. They may say that, okay, well, you know, if we've got a turnaround there, that works. Let's keep it a common driveway and have a single location of crossing the stream and then, you know, split from there. So that's just a conversation we can have. It works this way, it meets code this way, but, you know, given what we're trying to do with the conservation subdivision approach, minimizing disturbances and things like that, I just want to bring that up because that is another way that we could further reduce the impact on the site.
So you're taking a conservation subdivision approach, but not choosing to cluster in any way, correct?
Right. Well, and this, honestly, the site doesn't honestly lend itself to that
I just
type
wanted
of
to be
development anyway. Yeah.
Clear, because generally speaking, we think of conservation subdivisions as being more clustered.
Right, but those are definitely 2 separate things.
I understand. I just wanted to clarify for the record.
Okay. So yeah, so like I said, I just wanted to point that out for a topic for future discussion on this and moving forward, is that we, you know, depending on what the fire chief or whoever
You
is
will
doing that.
ultimately be in touch with the fire department.
Okay. That could be an opportunity for additional reduction. Okay.
I would also say, so Rhinebeck has a fire inspector, Bob DeLuca. So in addition to talking to the fire chief, you should reach out to Mr. DeLuca because he'll have to take a look at the plans, and I believe that the driveway that is serving 6 homes is a fire apparatus access road. Am I right about that? Under the building and fire code?
Right, so yeah, so we've,
And you're proposing 16-foot width for that?
yes, yeah.
So you'll need to get a determination from Mr. DeLuca that width is sufficient.
Exactly, because that typically, you know, a lot of places want to see 20 foot for something like that, but
Well, I
16
think
is the
26 is
maximum.
what the code requires, but I think with a conservation subdivision, we're not necessarily looking for a huge road, but we do want to understand that the road, whatever road does end up getting put in, is safe.
Exactly, yeah, agreed. If there are no other questions on this one, we can move to the next one. And so this is the conservation subdivision plan itself, and so this just, you can start to see why we split some of the things out into separate plans, because this becomes a little bit, you know, I know what I'm looking at because I'm preparing all these, but I'm sure you guys are looking at this one. Oh, it's a lot of stuff. So this just puts everything together from the previous plans on one map and gives you some indications of, you know, where the lot lines are, how the setbacks are applied, driveway widths and lengths, and things like that. And actually you can't read it obviously, but down here is the chart that tells you for each individual lot, the lot size, the amount of that lot that is within a potential, you know, developable once you back out the characters.
This part's the part that's the part that's
Yeah, exactly. Can you guys read that? So on this, we've got the smallest lot on here is lot 1, which is just under 5 acres. The largest lot is actually almost 20 acres. The reason for that is that's what happens once you back yourself into lot sizes after all of the parameters are applied for wetlands and buffers and soils and slopes and everything else, you gotta still have developable area. So you can see on that 20-acre lot, there's only 4.63 of that is the usable portion for development. So there's a lot more consistency in there. The other thing on here that this map shows as well is these blue dotted areas on the map represent partial realignment of some sections of the existing horse trails just to avoid the new horse trail that passes right along the back of a bedroom window or something for one of the home sites. So there isn't very much of that, but you can see it a little bit like over here where you routed that around. If I remember correctly, that one's going right up basically through where this home site is. So that's what that's representing, but we are maintaining the horse trails in the design, just the partial.
Maintaining them but relocating some.
Right, partial realignment just to have it correlate to the home sites and the lot layouts.
And the use of this property for horse trails is a private agreement between the Lansman Hill
I
Association?
believe that's correct, between the property owners and the Lansman County.
Okay, and is there a written agreement that lays out where the
I believe there,
trails are?
I don't know if it includes where the trails are, but I think each property owner signs the agreement, and they do have a map. I haven't seen.
Well, I guess we want some updated information on,
Okay.
we want to see that document, we want to know how, if you're making, that you have the power to make these changes, or is there a superseding document that requires them to stay where they are? I don't know, but I think we want to see that.
To look into that.
My anticipation it would be more of a right of access and use as opposed to here's where they have to stay, but yeah.
Yeah, well, let's just,
Yep.
documents that.
Are there any more questions on this one before we move to the next plan? Only two to go.
Okay.
Okay, so this plan is the open space conservation map. So this blue area, making all the way through and around all these, the area set aside after the home sites are laid in and the developable area for each of them, which is sized appropriately to accommodate well and septic and things that would have to be able to fit. And it represents, I believe it's 65% for this zone that we require to put into that conservation area. So that's what that is indicating. So you can see that 102 acres is a big chunk of it that gets set aside to conservation.
Has anyone spoken to a land conservancy?
From our initial meeting that we had via Teams back in October, it was our understanding during that meeting that there likely is not going to be an entity that's going to want to take on the oversight, maintenance, and things that come along with that. So this would likely for this project be something that would go into like an HOA kind of thing.
An HOA?
The homeowners association.
Uh-huh. But the zoning law requires, I believe, that the conserved land be accepted as as a conservation easement by a land trust.
We would have to look, I guess, into that to determine that, but I think as long as you are meeting the goal of it and setting the areas aside, whether it's through an HOA or through an undivided share or whatever vehicle might be established, it's the end game that's the objective.
Right, well, you of course can refer to the zoning law and take a look. In my memories, it says shall, but in any case, I guess then what remains here are what you would consider to be building envelopes, is that correct?
Right. I mean, not that means, so don't take that to mean that everything that's not in blue is clear cut and there's nothing left. That just means that that's the portion of each of those lots that individual lot owner, basically that's not in a conservation easement.
Right, so it's open for development.
Right, exactly. But not, I mean, still gotta meet code, it's still gotta be approved,
Of
it's
course.
still gotta, it's not like that's gonna be covered with a warehouse or
And is the idea for each lot owner to build their own home, or will the developer be building the homes?
I'm not sure, but I assume each.
I think that's still being considered, but the idea is that each homeowner will build their own home, maybe through the same developer, maybe through deed restrictions. But yeah, to keep the, character of the neighborhood consistent.
Is there any plan to restrict what can be built within a building envelope? In other words, if a particular property owner wants a pool house, an accessory dwelling, and a fence, is that okay, or are there going to be restrictions on what can be built?
I think there will definitely be restrictions. We haven't developed exactly what those will be, but they couldn't do whatever they want. Deed restrictions.
If an owner at the lower part of this large parcel wants to take a walk, is it okay if he goes on other property owners' property?
We haven't really discussed that.
We're there.
I think we haven't discussed that, but we certainly can.
You see, the sort of conservation easements that I'm familiar with would entail a certain amount of clustering, and the conserved area would be owned commonly. In other words, these parcels would look more like the building envelopes, and the rest of it would be commonly owned by the homeowners association, right? Which would make it much more possible for a land trust to be interested in protecting this land. No land trust is going to deal with 10 property owners, to protect conserved land. Is that a possibility, that instead of having these larger parcels, that parcels would be essentially the size of the building envelopes, and the rest of the land would be conserved and commonly owned?
I can't speak for the owner, the developer, but in my assessment, that would be kind of going contradictory to the code's objectives for a conservation subdivision and the character of the area and what trying to do here with maintaining
I
large
would
home
say
sites.
exactly the opposite. I would say it would be more in keeping with what the code has to say about conservation subdivisions. I mean, the whole idea, you've got a parcel here, not even seeing it, I'm sure it's gorgeous. With this kind of water and streams and what I'm sure are rock outcrops and slopes, it's got to be just absolutely beautiful. And so you're inviting people to build a house in what could be a park. And the whole idea would be, if you build your house here, you're going to have this whole area to enjoy. But that's the idea of a conservation easement, that there would be trails, and places for the entire community there to enjoy. I think you ought to take another look at what the zoning law has to say about conservation subdivisions.
Hold the land. So it talks about the permanent protection of open space with the set aside needing to be held by a land trust. If the land trust doesn't want it, then the option goes to the town. We know the town doesn't want to take it, so that's not an option. So that's for the permanent protection of the open space for the easement itself. The ownership of the land can be within the HOA. The easement to protect it needs to be with a conservation organization. So there's it seems that there's two steps to this, but again, we know there's the town isn't interested, and we know there have been limited ability to find conservation organizations interested in building open space like this. So it is something we'll have to discuss and work through as we go through the process for sure.
Okay.
I think we're getting into a lot of operational questions.
Well, then why don't we let you finish your presentation, and then I'll ask Jim to take it, make some comments, and then try to move on. So you got one more page, right?
And basically, the last page is just, in talking with Gretchen when we submitted, she just asked what we think was a good add. If we could just include a plan that kind of strips away all of the layering of data on top of this, just so that you've got a clean plan that lets you be able to see the layout, the lot layout, home sites and driveways on it. So that's all. This one's not really a substantive design related plan. It's more of a graphic conveyance of where we're getting at with the conservation layout.
Jim, I think you've got some.
Yeah, I'm gonna go through the kind of high level. At this point, I think that's where we are. I think my hope is that, we'll see where the board is at the end of the meeting, but if you're okay with it, we'll do a procedure resolution. We'll just have to get this in the pipeline as an official discussion item through the public hearing process, but we'll see where we end up at the end of tonight. So a couple of these have already been mentioned. The conservation subdivision is a multi-step process that requires a lot of upfront work showing the yield plan and the ratio of dwelling units. We talked about landsman horseman trails on the property, and we need to make sure that those are preserved. We show some proposed alternative alignments. We'll need approvals from DOT. We need approvals from county health. We've already applied to the DEC, and they've claimed jurisdiction of some wetlands. So we know that all that's underway. We've identified the stone walls, which we've discussed as being a priority for preservation in the town. We've talked about the driveway slopes, a lot of the things that we discussed before, so we've gone through a number of those. I'm sure you're going to require a SWIP for this, so that'll be something that would be reviewed by CPL. Fire department we talked about, something the low yields. Where some of this comes in, and we talked about this with one other conservation subdivision in the past, is that the code talks about the conservation subdivision as being an alternative to a conventional subdivision. It's a rigid and sprawling pattern of suburban development that occurs when lots of dwelling units are laid out in a uniform pattern over the landscape, generally with little regard for the value of natural, cultural, and scenic resources. A lot of us, as Melody said, think about it. We think about clustering of these as well, and preserving large areas of open space. We'll go back to this one, it's helpful. So there's really two points to this. One is the conservation subdivision, conserving those resources. The other is the idea of clustering, but they are somewhat separate when the code is written. We've gone through all the sheets. We'll have to talk about the ownership of the open space and all that kind of thing. But really at this point, I think the point that we want to point out is that it is a four-step process. I think we do have the information, this initial information, to be able to understand where the applicant's coming from and where they're looking to go, so that we could start talking about that four-step process, which is, step one, delineating open space, location of house sites, alignment of streets and trails, and drawing of the lot lines. Those are all in there, but those are the steps we go through as we go to talk about it. And then there are design criteria that have to be followed as well. So at this point, I think we have a number of questions. I do think we have a lot of material we need to start this discussion, and I don't have a whole lot more. We'll certainly get into the nitty-gritty of it in a future day, but this is going to take a couple meetings.
Sure. Other planning board members? Comments at this point? John?
I would just raise a couple of issues for the applicant to just be aware of going forward. It's premature to think about this, but I do notice that the proposed driveways cross steep slope areas, and so at some point meeting qualifications for driveway permits is something that you'll have to consider. Compliance with New York State Town Law 280A is something that you'll have to consider. And then I know you're talking about an HOA, but compliance with the New York State Martin Act is also something that the planning board is going to require before the end of the process.
Anyone else? Jim, anything more?
I have a number of items in here, but we'll pass on to the applicant. I don't think I have to take
Yeah, you'll get a
tonight.
complete set of Jim's comments.
What about this staying 100 feet away from a slope of 25 degrees or more. That restricts the space for development, and it makes me wonder if that were not followed, whether you could do at least a bit more clustering. So you perhaps wouldn't have to be crossing the stream at the upper right area of the parcel. I mean, being close to a rock outcrop of a house is beautiful.
Right, I mean, we followed the code and the layout that everything was put together, and that's what's access into these
Does
areas
the
that
code
wants to put houses.
suggest staying away from Hannah's, keeping development 100 feet away from slopes or
Do you take his word for it? I don't remember that one, but I didn't look at it for that.
We can
It's
check on
certainly
that.
not in the conservation subdivision section, which I just read.
I can give you
Well,
guys a
we
piece
can
of
go back and check. Well, as Jim said, he has for you here a draft procedural resolution, which essentially will accept it to begin the process. This is, we've got a few more steps, obviously.
One question I do have is that the way the code is laid out, and I think this came up in our virtual meeting when we were talking back in October, the yield plan purpose is to establish an allowable number of lots. And when we had that conversation, you guys asked if we would, even though it's not how it goes sequentially for the code, if we would prepare the conservation subdivision plans as well. So that's what we did, kind of why we're here through all these right now. But we really did need to get buy-in from the board on the plans, so we know that we're not chasing a shadow of not knowing if we're allowed to build that now or not.
How do people feel about accepting it and moving forward? Feel ready at this time? Do you have enough information?
We need to open it as an application and start deeper conversation. I think, yes, I think Ed has made a tremendous amount of really valuable points that I think there's more work to be done. And I think her points, I really want more clarification on. So I don't know, to speak again, like, this is exactly the way it might be in the end-all be-all, but I definitely think the conversation is.
John, your thoughts?
I mean, my personal opinion is that I think what you have is sufficient to begin the review. I also agree with others that there's some things to discuss about the design. And I would just say to the planning board members that if you take a look at some point when you have a couple of minutes at the conservation subdivision provisions in the subdivision law, and there are some in the zoning law as well, it'd be good to familiarize yourself with those as we start moving forward. Because those standards are going to have to be met before you're able to say, issue an approval for
Jim,
subdivision.
put the conserved area map up just one more time. I just wanted to make one more comment. The one that shows the big blueberry. Yeah, that one. Yeah, but part of what the zoning law is trying to do is protect habitat. And this does a good deal of that, but also part of the idea is not to interrupt it with structures. And there can well be more structures than we're seeing here eventually. And that's why I made the comment about a little more clustering and perhaps getting rid of what's happening at the upper right-hand side. And then you have a much more cohesive area of conserved land. Just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just saying, the only reason, I'd like to bring this forward, if you're okay with it, for public hearings. I think these discussions are good to have in the public hearing. The applicants come before us for pre-conference meetings a couple times now, and I think we're at the point with the information, if you think it's adequate, then it needs to be discussed amongst the board
Probably.
moving forward, yeah.
Is everyone in agreement?
procedural resolution.
So a draft procedure resolution for the board's consideration, hereby acting as follows on the application by local land partners, resolved for major subdivision, conservation subdivision under Town Code Chapter 101, for subdivision of an existing 99.2 acre lot at 523 Route 308 within the RC5. Accepting the application, supporting documents is adequate for further review by the planning board as advised to the public. We will classify the action as a listed under seeker, for which coordinated environmental quality review is not required. We will schedule the public hearing for February 17th, no earlier than 6:05 p.m. We will send this to the CAB for review, Dutchess County Planning, and we need at least 2 planning board members to do a site visit, but we may want to open this one up to.
I will definitely want to go.
I will like to go too.
All right, and then once you two send a date, if you want to share that date, planning board members who wish to
Right.
attend can do so.
Part of the issue is, it's covered with snow right
Yeah,
now.
I was just gonna say.
I'm gonna wanna see a lot of it. I'm gonna wanna walk a lot of it. So it has to be amenable to that.
I don't know that we're, we certainly are not necessarily being pushed to have all of this done at the next meeting. So, I mean, we can work together around weather conditions and other things and try and figure it out. And if we have to push it out further than we normally would, I would think that that would be amenable to you as well. We don't want anybody hurt out in the field, or we want them to have the opportunity to see all of it once rather than to keep going back and forth. So does that work for you guys?
Yep.
So they'll reach out, start a conversation with you, and then they'll just keep everybody else informed.
Right.
Yeah, and I would just second that, really seeing the whole parcel thoroughly, which can take quite a bit of time, just
Right.
from being there, so
Might
just
be more
give
than
us-
one visit.
It might be more than one visit, and it might be, a good chunk of time at each visit.
May I have a motion?
Sorry. I have a question about number 2, Jim. If this is unlisted, it would be subject to seeker review. I can't really read.
Well, it's on this because it's a subdivision, but I don't think it doesn't require coordinated environmental quality review.
Say again, please?
It doesn't require coordinated environmental quality.
Oh, gotcha, coordinated. Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay? You still puzzled?
I'm just wondering, so there's no other involved agencies on this?
That's a good for subdivision. I mean, DEC's already weighed in, because there are wetlands on the property, and we'll obviously go to county health and DOT if we were with any project. But I don't see this being classified as something that requires coordinated environmental review
Okay, understood, thank you.
for residential subdivision.
And we talked about conservation subdivision and conservation organization. You haven't had any conversations with anyone?
Nothing official,
Not official? or-
nothing official. I reached out to a few board members, and they just find out the process,
Okay.
so just, but we can certainly do that,
Okay.
move forward.
Well, we'll have time. All right, do I have a motion? Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Thank you. It's nice to have all these documents. You did a great job on this. So thank you. That concludes the new application portion of the meeting. Now, in terms of public hearings, the first scheduled is 968 Route 308 LLC. Wetlands permit for new primary street addition, renovations, hardscaping, in-ground spa. At the request of the applicant, we will be wanting to continue that to the February 17th meeting.
Reschedule.
Rescheduled?
Yeah, because they didn't notice it.
Okay, so we're rescheduling for February 17th. Make a motion? Is there anyone here from the public wishing to speak to this application? Okay. Now I have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Sean. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Second public hearing scheduled is 34 Mill Road, LLC. Site plan review for renovations and addition. The applicant is not ready to present again. We checked, and they are happy to go out 2 months We spoke with them this evening, so is there anyone here from the public wishing to speak to 34 Millville? If not, what's the date for
March 16th.
March 16th? May I hear a motion?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carried. The last public hearing for this evening is that of Darren Prince and Kelly Swiss, Acker Hook Road, site plan review for the construction of a single-family dwelling, covered terrace and grounds pool with fence. Good evening.
Good evening.
So,
Okay.
I don't have anything new to present tonight. We received the memos from CPL and Planning for Places and responded in depth to the questions of technical review. I'm happy to answer any questions regarding that, but I believe the critical path moving forward is to get a date for y'all to come out to the site. I know we had a little trouble doing that offline, so I'm happy to do that right now.
And we know that CPL has received your responses and is reviewing that, so we're expecting to hear from them as well. And the health department, not health department, sorry, the fire department?
We've reached out to the fire department and we coordinated with them.
Okay. So we have asked, I think you're correct in what you identified as the tasks we need to take tonight. We have reached out to CPL regarding another project of the villas, and we have asked Christian, who's reviewing that for us, to be present at our next meeting in 2 weeks. So I'm, with your agreement, suggesting that we move you to a 2-week cycle.
Okay, and that's on a Monday.
It will be back to a Monday, is that right?
let me double check. The 17th is the 2nd. 2nd's Monday.
Yeah. That way, if there's any discussion that needs to take place involving Christian, he will already be present at the meeting.
Understood. So that would be February 2nd?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that work for you?
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone have questions, comments at this time? That was that?
Okay, can we set a date for a site walkthrough?
We can try. I would say the caveat is the same as we just had the discussion.
Yes.
You know, we can set a date, but it's all going to be weather dependent. But I don't know what's happening.
All right, I mean, it would be, I would press if we could please get that done before the meeting on the 2nd. I mean, we will,
Are you going to have the driveway location staked out? How are we going to know what we're looking at?
well, we've already been through it a number of times, so, no.
The new one?
The new driveway is really, it's what currently exists, which is really half built up to the property line. And then it's what we've discussed in the past up to the house location site. So I don't see a reason why we'd have to connect the dots. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Well, I guess they'll find out when they're in the field, right? And if they come back and say they couldn't connect the dots, then we'll be where we were at. So, who
But
is
just to
in-
avoid it, just a couple stakes could just make sure that we don't have another question.
Well, there's definitely gonna be
You
snow
know?
on the ground, spray paint, not the toxic stuff, but
Yeah, something easy.
like the orange, I don't know, it's probably still toxic. But that might be just helpful, just like marking.
Sure, we can.
I'm assuming there's gonna be snow on the ground, seeing that we have storms pretty much lined up for the next 3 weeks.
We use dark paint before first site visits, as long as it's on the ground.
Yeah. Or like maybe footprints, send Zach out there with extra set of boots.
All right, we'll mark it out.
Snowshoes for everyone.
Yeah, perfect.
All right. Who's interested in, what's the best, I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this. You had some days of the week that were better than others, or?
Well, I mean, if you give us a few dates, we'll do our best to make sure we're available. I mean, if we look at a few times next week.
So why don't I ask Jim to coordinate getting an email out with some possible dates and see when people are available. Does that work? Is that something you can handle?
Email planning board, get a couple dates.
All of us together.
Yeah, I mean, as long as we can do that, I know we tried to do that leading up to this meeting and it didn't happen. So, I mean, I'm happy to either set a date right now if we all just look at our calendars and we know we're the last on the agenda, so.
Nope, there's one more thing after you, so. Do you want, it's up to you folks.
Oh, short, brief April.
Okay, I don't, whatever works for anyone else. I have my calendar on my phone, so.
Now that you know what the dates
Yeah,
are.
all my dates, exactly.
Folks?
Well, I don't know that everybody has to go.
No.
Am I understanding Sean is willing to go? Sharon, are you?
Yeah, depending when it is.
Yeah, I mean,
I do
really
think,
trust
I do
those
think
two.
we really need to reach out to Craig because he's been, he's
Right.
been at all the site visits, so,
But, I mean.
How about Wednesday, the 28th at 10 a.m.?
that's not gonna work for Craig. I know that.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
this is his job.
We've done, yeah, I think we did
what-
like 9 or after 4:30.
8 a.m.?
I can't speak for Craig.
I'm still making my coffee though, so.
Also,
Let's, what, can we just, this is what we can promise you, we'll be very, quick in getting a response to you
Okay.
with a commitment to have it done before
It's the 2
that,
weeks.
the 2 weeks.
Before the 2 weeks, okay.
Yes. Understanding that you want it done beforehand.
Thank you.
All right,
On the
Jim
same
and I will
page.
talk and we'll be in touch with Craig one way or the other. Tom is out of the country, so we're just gonna have to deal with that. But Craig is around, just taking a child back to college.
Please have a snow cap available just in case.
Okay. Anyone here from the public? Then we'll have a motion to continue this to February 2nd.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Thank you.
See you then.
Yep. That takes care of all of the agenda items, being the planning board discussion of a couple things that we want to bring to your attention. At our last meeting regarding the villas, there was a lot of conversation about the corridor there, that section of 9G that goes from the traffic light at Rookies to the Bridge Approach Road. And we were discussing our limitations as a planning board and POT's involvement, et cetera, et cetera. And there was interest expressed by many people, neighbors and us as well, about really needing to go back and take a look at this area of town and what issues are continuing to emerge as more and more is developed along that roadway. I asked Jim to send to you the document that he had prepared many years ago now.
June, July 2020.
So in 2020, as part of a committee, subcommittee that is looking at zoning issues, the same question came up then. A little bit of background, many people feel that when the comprehensive plan was being developed and was completed in 2009, followed by the 2010 zoning law, that this area of town was perhaps one of the least studied. And so at that time, we identified back in 2020 the idea that we should take a look at it. And Jim, at the encouragement of the town board, did. And I'll turn it over to you to talk about what you did. And where I wanted to go with this tonight is a discussion about how we as a planning board can proactively move something to the town board that encourages them based on what we've learned over the years with Ruby's going in, Dave's tree service, those things have happened since Jim did his initial examination. And I know John has some thoughts about, how far that should go. So I'll start with, that's where I want to go with this tonight, as well as talking about some outstanding zoning improvement opportunities that we all feel needs a little bit of a push from the planning board to move it a little bit forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim.
Yeah, so I just put together a couple notes. I'll go through them pretty quickly, but essentially, Melody kind of laid it out there with new development along the 9G corridor, including Rugies, the former Stamp property, Dave's Tree Service, new commercial flooring showroom that was approved opposite Gold Coast Road, 4 6 months ago, something like that, by the board. We have Rhinebeck Villas under review, and there's more known and anticipated development likely to be brought to the planning board in the future along this corridor. Concerns, we've all heard them related to traffic, safety, even some of the land use assumptions and zoning were put in place in the early 2000s along the corridor, as well as elsewhere in the town, and kind of come up to the forefront of some conversations. Since this board, has firsthand experience and knowledge of recent pending potential future projects throughout the town, we thought a discussion regarding these issues, concerns that have been raised, and discussion of the potential scope of just how far they go and where they are, would be a useful exercise to undertake, and then possibly bring as an action item to the town board. So as a quick history, in the summer 2020, town board asked me just to do a quick, we called it a Route 9G corridor assessment to investigate safety concerns and land use development and potential build out along the 9G corridor, to understand the current and possible future land use potential and how things could change. It is a major gateway into the town, one of the principal routes through the town. It sees significant traffic. It has one of the highest vehicular traffic counts of any road in the town, obviously, coming in from the bridge approach. With the town being predominantly auto-oriented community and development pressure increasing year after year for many years, volumes have increased, as has interest in developing land. Back in 2009, the comprehensive plan did do a detailed land use, rezoning, transportation, natural features analysis. It had proposals and recommendations for the town that did include 9G. Again, some of those maybe are being questioned now as to whether or not they need to change. It has been, 15 years since the comp plan was adopted, and we typically like to look at, updating comp plans every 10 years or so. This is usually good. So, because things do change over time, certainly as development comes in. There are also transportation objectives and actions that were listed in there, so I need to go through all those, but some of them did relate specifically to Route 9G. So the study that we did back in 2000 came about because we knew that Ruby's wanted to move the stamp, we knew the Villas wanted to come in, and had an understanding there were probably going to be some other things that came in. So we actually talked with, we had a meeting between the town board, state DOT, and others. I thought that there might be some potential for some very significant changes to Route 9G coming forward, as well as potential major changes to the intersections at the bridge approach, as well as the 9G9 intersection. Based on the discussions we had at that time, none of that was seen as being necessary. The changes that were seen as necessary is essentially what you see now at Stamp, with the left turn lane that went in for that project, and then the left turn lane, proposed left turn lane in Villas that you've seen on the proposed plans that have been in front of you. And that was kind of where we landed back in 2020, talking with DOT, knowing what was going on. They saw those as the two big projects, and there would probably be two left turn lanes for each of those. No discussion of a center turn lane, the length of it, or any concerns really for anything in between. And so, I think in a way that 2020 assessment that we did is still valid, and I think the concerns have bubbled back up and have come to the forefront again. And since this board reviews the projects all the time, you know what's going on, you drive it regularly. We just thought it would be good to have a discussion and be proactive, to have that discussion, bring it to the town board, and decide, maybe what, how to move forward. I did get access to the DOT's crash data just this afternoon, and I can tell you I took a very quick look at it, and the vast majority of the crashes over the last 3 years, I'm going back 3 years, were related to deer. There were a couple, I can't remember the exact number, maybe 3 or 4 crashes on there. There was one that looked pretty bad, involved 3 vehicles, but the others were rear ends, which essentially is driver behavior, following too close, driving too fast, that kind of thing. But the vast majority of crashes appear to have been deer, and I can keep digging back further. Again, I did it for about 10 minutes before I came here because I just got access to it. But I think, part of the discussion is going to be based on, what you've seen happen, what we've heard from residents and the neighbors and things like that is, do we want to, kind of pick up where we left off in 2020 and talk with the town board about the need for looking at the build-out potential and, the recommendation that were in the comp plan, the zoning that took place, and are there any changes needed? Are there concerns about safety, vehicular traffic, vehicular safety? Things have changed, obviously, in the last 5 years. that corridor and elsewhere, on 9 as well. And, does it extend beyond the, the 9G corridor from, say, the bridge approach down to Route 9? If we were going to look at this, we want to look further. We want to look, down Route 9 to the village line or the top. So we want to extend maybe a little further over the other side of Route 9, where we did have that sign. We really had sign discussion, right, for the business on the other side. What's that for the rental place? But we did have a discussion about how that is kind of more of a non-residential extension, kind of Route 9 and 9G there, and then it gets into the residential. So we kind of have a little stub there of sorts that doesn't really fit in with necessarily the rest of the land use on that side of the road. So just wanted to bring it up for initial conversation on any thoughts you had and any recommendations you might want to start crafting or have moved draft we might bring to the town board or others.
What would you like to add?
Just a couple of things, if I might. So I was on the comp plan revision committee for the 2009 version of the zoning law and the comp plan, and at the time, when you're redoing the comp plan for the whole town and the zoning law for the whole town, it's a lot of ground to cover, and honestly, the committee struggled a little bit. This area was kind of the last area to come up for consideration. And it's always been, from a land use policy standpoint, in terms of figuring out what land uses made sense there, it's always been sort of a difficult fit because it's a mix out there. You have some commercial uses, but you also have folks that are living out there. So I would support personally. I think it's with the changes that have come through the Ruby's project and for Rhinebeck Villas are big changes for that corridor, and I think the time is ripe for to be able to think about this again, and this area, which is one of the gateways to the town, I think this area would benefit from everybody thinking about just this area for a change and having it have the sole attention of the planning board and other folks who think about this so that we can, the traffic is one issue, but the other thing that needs to be done is to think about how do we want, given where things are now, how do we want this area to grow and to present itself? So I would support that. I think the other thing I just want to say is that I think it would be terrific because you guys do so much thinking about land use and you see so much during the planning board process, and the town board formulating land use policies only sometimes just a piece of what they're doing. I think it would be a good habit to develop for the planning board to be able to be the driver, to bring questions like that to the town board, to tell them about these are things that we think it would be really good for you to be thinking about, and we're willing to help you think about them. And to try to set up a dynamic going forward where the planning board is a springboard for some good positive thinking, because nobody knows more about what needs to be done, and we'll talk about that a little bit when Jim talks about the amendments, but nobody knows really more about what needs to be done, what issues are being presented than you guys, because you're seeing everything all the time. So I would encourage you to do that.
Because it's been, there's been such a delay in what Ruby's is intending and has been intending all along to do there. We all know there's supposed to be a phase 2 and phase 3 on that property, so we haven't seen the last of the growth on that property itself. And if they're able to do what they want to do in phase 2 and phase 3, granted, it's not necessarily going to be adding new vehicles because they'll be moving them from the crossroads there, but it will be concentrating them in one area as opposed to coming from the Ford place and then, so we know that's coming. I know because I see information coming in that they're moving through their discussions with the tribes about how they can develop that property. So they haven't given up plans to doing anything there. So before we go into the amendments, let's take a minute to talk about this and get some feedback as to how you feel about it.
I have a lot of notes, because I want to look at like each business, right? IXL. If people from Rhinebeck weren't going to IXL, they're going to be driving to Kingston. They're going to be on the same road. If people weren't going to Rugies, they're going to be going to Kingston, same road. So when I look at all the businesses on that corridor, the traffic isn't going to change whether or not there's a business on that corridor, or they're going to be going to Kingston for the most place. So,
Entering and exiting does add another dimension to it.
Okay.
Getting on the road and getting off.
Can I finish up?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so on top of that, like, the challenge that we're dealing with, I'd rather say, is the increase in population of people living and coming to Rhinebeck and using 9G as a corridor more than the businesses on the corridor. To me, like, there's just, those businesses on the corridor, if they didn't exist, that road's gonna be just used as much. I'd say maybe 1 in 20 cars on 9G are actually using it for a business. And I think it's maybe 1 in 50. They're using it to travel 9G because they don't want to travel 9 because of traffic. If I look at it, it's mainly construction vehicles, a lot of big trucks, a lot of construction vehicles. So I don't disagree that we should look at it. But I would say, like, I don't think Rugies, who has Ford dealership across the street, moving it over, again, yes, concentration, and Rugies on the corner, moving there, I don't think it's gonna change traffic there. I don't think the villas is really gonna change traffic there. What we have is we just have a larger concentration of people living in our area, and where do they have to go to shop? Kingston. Or they're, you know, traveling to Hudson or something like that. It's not like, because I grew up here. I never dealt with waiting in traffic for 45 minutes across the bridge between the hours of 3:30 and 5:30. That's the reality today. It doesn't matter if you try to take 6 back roads or you take the main route, that's what you have. So it's just a larger concentration of people. And I just want to be careful, like, we're understanding that before we're understanding the businesses.
But with an analysis of some kind, could come to that conclusion, right?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a number of ways, you know, we could go, and I guess, you know, the question is, what are the interests or concerns? But I hear you, Sean. I mean, it's a major route, as I said, coming in and out of the corridor, right? And so I think part of the thought process is, you know, are the uses that are there now, do they make sense? But like I said, it may go beyond 9G, and, you know, how are we going to plan for those?
And
How are
it's
we
hot
going to plan for the
spots,
infrastructure?
so like 7 to
Absolutely.
10 is brutal. It loosens up for maybe a couple hours, and then, you know, then again, it's like 5 o'clock. You'll sit on the other end of 9G down by the 308 intersection. You'll sit on top of that hill for 40 minutes waiting for that light on 9G.
Yeah, so part of what we can do, and this is, you know, part of what I've been thinking through is, you know, we don't have to do a full-blown assessment right up front. We can do something called an OD study, which is an origin destination study, see where traffic is coming from and going to. We can see how much passenger traffic there is. I'm sure that, you know, that the large amount of traffic is passing through there, like you say, going to Kingston or going to Red Hook, going south the other direction, so we have a ton of passenger traffic. And so it's good to know, you know, what's going on, you know, related to that. There's not much we can do about that. Again, I haven't found from the data a massive safety issue related to crashes. There are a lot, the most of them are actually down toward 9G.
And there is not a ton of residential on that strip. There's a few outlet roads that lead to residential, but it's not like there's houses physically on that strip. Again, I'm not hearing what the public is saying. I'm not saying that middle road is like close your eyes and go. Like, but I think the bigger issue is just the concentration of people using that road and not the businesses that are looking to go there.
I have a couple of other.
So the idea is just thinking about planning for that, you know, and then the idea that we'll probably see more traffic and other things coming in. So we, you know, if Villas moves forward, we can assume we're gonna have a new left turn lane, you know, in front of Villas. We'll have a left turn lane at Ruby's. There was a discussion, depending on how far this damn property goes, that left turn lane could eventually need to be modified even further, and more than just an uncontrolled left turn lane.
Yeah.
Those are discussions for the future, but it depends on how much development may or may not go in there. And, there's a lot of land back in there, but a lot of that land is also difficult to develop because there's wetlands and the setback requirements that the town board instituted in its zoning change about 5, 6 years ago. Put some pretty good setbacks on it because we wanted to make sure to preserve the look of the corridors that gateway in. And those are some of the considerations we want to think about too.
So what's the lower speed limit? No, what's it's like it's like one of these fish 22s I bought in general. So I'll stop. I know I don't want to add something, but
Well, what I wanted to talk about was something other than the traffic, which is this stretch of land is supposed to be a scenic road, and it's the entry in that direction to Rhinebeck, and it's not scenic. At least parts of it are very not scenic. The other interesting thing is that on the road on 9G at the bridge are at least 3 parcels that are zone residential. Nothing's on them. It's vacant land, but it's zone residential. And then further down, it's zone commercial. There are existing structures that could be, their appearance could be improved. Even Four Brothers has a strip of land between the road and the parking lot, which is not planted at all. It couldn't, I think, be planted with tall trees because you could have you would be able to see the traffic coming. But certainly there could be some lower foliage on that strip that would improve the appearance of that place. And then, of course, there's the building next to it, which appears to have a bunch of stuff parked in back of it, some kind of trailers or something.
I believe that is, I think that's on the list of things that's being looked at in terms of those trailers, not trailers.
So among other things, I think is the decision, should this strip be zone commercial? If it's zone commercial, are there specific planning objectives for anything that is put in there? Do we want to be thinking more about screening than has been thought? Those kinds of questions.
Please, Sharon.
I think it's two pieces, which I think Sean was alluding to. One is how is it going to be developed, and how is that consistent with what's in the comprehensive plan today? A lot has happened since 2020, and a lot has happened since 2009. 2020, we're talking like early COVID. The density has increased wildly. The demand is constantly going up. So what do those numbers of density look like now compared to even just like years ago? I mean, it's like a question. We should know that, right? And how it's developed with a very high volume of increased development and interest in development happening, I 100% think the town should look at the comprehensive plan and see, do we have the best plan for this area set forth? What is the disadvantage of that? These are really important structures for the future of our town. And as for density, absolutely it's a corridor, but that corridor is increasing in volume, whether there's businesses there or people coming to town. I mean, like, I don't know if this matters, but like, we were just having a meeting today, we got this like counter on our door, averaging 600 people on a Saturday coming in. On a Saturday, 85% probably from visitors out of town curious about coming right back. They're all coming down that corridor. Like, the high volume is only increasing, and so I think we do have responsibility, unrelated just to the hotel, but just what is happening here, what is the density increase, and what can we do to be consistent with what's important in our town, to make sure that that area, it can be developed in a conscious way, in a thoughtful way, that allows us to expand, but I think it's an oversight if we don't look back at the comprehensive plan and say, I think this might need to be shifted, or make sure that it's in alignment with where we are today.
You're talking about the entire comprehensive plan?
I mean, I'm focusing on this area, but yeah, just especially, I appreciate what John was saying, like this was kind of the last area that they got to, so just to look at this a little closer, and I mean, is it, because I think there's a lot of undeveloped space there, and there's not a lot of commercial areas to develop here, so I think it will attract more people.
It's the only, and if I'm correct, it's the only zoning area in the town where sort of light industrial is allowed, which is
Right.
why the stamp property was there. Anything that's coming in any sort of new commercial light industrial, that's the only place you can go in the town, which to some extent I think makes it even more warranted. That's the only place these places can go. Now, a holistic look at the comprehensive plan might change other things. I honestly think at this point we can encourage that the time is right to begin to think about that process. But I'd like to focus, because as all of these have come in, the same questions keep coming to us as the planning board. And, you know, I think it behooves us, and we have a responsibility to say, we've looked at, you know, Foster flooring, we've looked at this, the same questions are coming up. I'm not trying to predict what the right answer is, and everything you say may very well prove to be 100% true, but will at least have driven the question of, let's be sure. Let's be sure.
Doesn't it also save us from answering these questions again and again and again as we get into more applications that are gonna come into development?
I don't know if it does that.
Right, maybe not.
But it
But
does respond to the neighbors who are coming and saying, please pay attention to what we're telling you. This is our road, we live here, we care. And I think that's part of, you know, we assured them that we would make their concerns. No, we sit here and say, we don't control it, DOT controls it, it's out of our hands. But what's in our hands is bringing that issue to the board in town that can make some determination in the future. Sharon? Okay. All right. John, what else do you want to
I
add?
just wanted to say that I think thinking about it is a way to try to get out in front of the issues that are being presented versus, I think when applications are coming into the planning board, we're sort of in a default reactive position. A proactive position is going to provide more options. Secondly, it would provide an opportunity for the town board to interact with the county planning department and get some input from the county. They are going to be, I think, interested in weighing in because of 9 and 9G and you don't think so, Jim?
I talked to the county. So the county is, I mean, I don't want to get way down the weeds on this, but the county is in the process of drafting / finishing up, I don't know exactly where they are. There's Safe Streets for All plan, it's a federal program, doing a safety plan for the entire county. And 9G was not identified as a major issue. I haven't identified on any of their maps that they've identified any major issues on 9G. So I did talk to planning staff. I hit a poll, but obviously we haven't had any real discussions. But it has not popped up in any of their analysis as being a major issue. At least, again, they're looking countywide. That plan will come out with what are called countermeasures that you can use in a lot of different places to try and help deal with things like speed, losing speed, and dealing with safety issues that you can use in a lot of similar places. So there are other roads that are like 9G. They'll come up with ideas you can use in other places. But nothing has popped up and bubbled up to the top in terms of this being a priority or in that plan. Not to say there are priorities, but just not in that plan. And that's kind of the focus for safety right now. So I started somebody to talk to them, and part of my getting the data, crash data was, after talking with them, I was able to find out how to get it because I couldn't get it in the past, and now they do allow consultants to get it done. So there's a lot of discussions we can have, and I think I can start, talking with them and with the MPO, which is the transportation arm of the county planning department, about, any thoughts they have.
Well,
I mean,
part of it-
beyond traffic safety, just from a planning standpoint, there are lots of things to think about there, even if there isn't a safety hazard.
And when we see corridors that are getting built up more commercially, we want to start thinking about those driveway access points and things like shared driveways and not having everyone have an individual driveway and all those different possible bits. So there are some things we can probably look at and consider that we would, see if the zoning pushes that forward enough, or if we want to maybe reinforce some of that as prioritization. Like Ruby's, for instance. Any more development that comes into Ruby's is always using that same driveway. We want to try and do a lot of that on these higher volume corridors. You don't want a ton of driveways. The more driveways you have, the more conflict point you have, the more potential issues. So there may be some small changes we can make. You may look at it and realize there's not a whole lot that needs to be done. You may look at it and say, hey, I don't like one or two of the potential uses that are there. Hey, we never thought about this one. Maybe we should consider a use that could go in there. Maybe boundaries need to be changed. I mean, there's a bunch of things we could talk about. Maybe small tweaks. Those doesn't all have to be, massive, large-scale changes. But usually when I do corridor studies and analysis, we have to start somewhere. So I start with some data analysis, and usually we have a committee or something to bring it forward. I think
that's kind of what we're trying to do, is just a kind of a brief brainstorming exercise with this board as to any thoughts you have on priorities and the situation at hand, and what might make sense moving forward.
What if somebody,
But it's a
one of
process.
those residential lots, wanted to put a commercial installation of some sort in there? What would they have to do?
So you're talking about one of these? One
Yeah.
of these that is zoned R55, they would have to do whatever permitted by the RC5 zoning district, which does not allow a whole lot of non-residential, there's some, certainly, but not large scale, commercial in that zoning district.
Right,
Well, would I be fair in
but
saying,
who would want to have a host there? I mean,
Everybody has different priorities. I mean, I live in a
But
small
that's
house.
I think the
I-
question you're raising is what we experienced at the end of the comprehensive plan when you ended up with this sort of mishmash in there of things that no
but one
business,
of the issues is maybe that area should be rezoned.
maybe,
Yeah.
maybe.
I think at this point, not June, for the most part, that area, because you're gonna have such limited development on 9, that is a commercial, I know it's listed as the entrance to Rhinebeck. For the most part, I'd be more interested in putting a traffic count of the bridge and see which way they go from there. Because I think the entrance to Rhinebeck is gonna be Mount Rutzen, and that, unless you're going around Rhinebeck, then you're gonna be taking 9G. Like, depending on where you're coming from, I mean, it'd be interested to know like how much traffic across the bridge actually takes a right on 9G compared to goes on Mount Rutzen. Like, to me, that would be,
Well, these are the kinds of things that,
and I agree, I think, to me, I don't wanna see it be this big strip mall area, it's not what I'm suggesting. But I think the reality is like, that has turned already, whether we like it or not, into a commercial zone. And how can we control that better, right? Parking lots behind, like maybe beautification up front, like there's a lot of different things that we could do to still make an attractive commercial front. Because those lots are probably gonna sit forever if I had to guess.
so do I hear consensus that moving something to the town board is desirable at this point? If I were to ask Jim to put together something for us to review before the next meeting?
I think that on one page, you could clearly state what the conditions are. And on another page, you could have a list of questions that arise, that occur to the planning board about this. And I think the simpler, the more likely you are to get some action. I think we need a deep study on this section of road.
And again, I know it's kind of talking about two things. For me, the like zoning and the development planning feels more of my concern. It's like, there's as much of a, difficulty in people finding housing and affordability as there is for businesses too, right? And like that strip is valuable in different ways, but not necessarily for a house there. And so I just think there's some conversation we had. For me, it's the development of that space more than I'm overly worried about the traffic, but obviously there's density.
Right, check out Jim.
Yeah, that's how I feel, yeah.
Yes, I'll have Jim do something.
Yes, the answer, yes.
By consensus, and I'll ask him to have something to circulate before our next meeting, and then to officially move something from us to the town.
Jim, I didn't read your document because I'm terrible at life sometimes. Do you have a traffic count on that? You did?
Yeah, I mean, it's 5 years old, it's not.
Right, but it just means, like that might be one area, is just to have a fresh traffic count, just see, like, what's the increase? Obviously, it's doing the same time of year might be helpful, we can do it during the fair, that's really unfair.
Well, and that's the other thing, right? You have your peak hours, but certainly when you have the fair, that's a whole different ballgame, that's a whole different
Right.
discussion. But there are other things that maybe, we didn't consider 15 years ago that we need to consider related to the fair as it relates to traffic and proactive.
And just because I happen to know, I know that, the fairgrounds for those high intensity events, bring in all sorts of extra issues, police and traffic calming
yeah.
measures and.
Oh, I'm not, I think at the end of the day, it's a massive asset to our businesses in this town. I don't suggest that.
All right, so then,
I was just gonna go quick, Sean, just so you know, I mean, there are 13,000, like DOT's count, there are 13,420 vehicles going down 9G. It's a segment count, so it goes from here to here, where these dots are.
We're gonna outrun it.
Yeah, you got 22,000 coming off the bridge, 7,000 going down Mount
And what's
Hudson.
that,
That's
what's the
changed.
time period that that's occurring in?
It's usually peak hour.
I mean, I wouldn't put a house on Mount Hudson at this point.
So it breaks up into southbound and northbound, so you've got, 6,300 going southbound, 6,000 going northbound. Yeah, these are just taking off their counts. 3% traffic, 3% trucks. The 85th percentile speed is 56 miles an hour, which means 85% of the vehicles are
Speeding.
Yeah.
1 mile an hour. So there is data there, but it's just, you were asking just really roughly what it is. So yeah, there are a lot, as you know, of cars coming off on Mount Hudson, a number of them are coming down 90 here.
Yeah,
And then you've got, 12,000 coming the other way, so they split.
All kinds of
Is this a public?
Yeah, this is DOT's traffic
Wow.
data dealer.
fancy.
This is-
You got a new toy, huh?
That's amazing.
That's why people like me around.
That's right.
Show you all these fun data sources.
All right, so let's quickly then, if we would turn to Jim and an explanation. So before COVID, there was assembled a zoning subcommittee, which included a number of people, and they were going and looking at the zoning law and identifying things that were missing from the zoning law, things that didn't have definitions in the zoning law, things that could be making the process easier. COVID interrupted that, and a smaller group was reestablished last year and looked at some things and moved some things forward, but other things didn't get moved forward. And I'll let Jim summarize. He has been keeping over the years lists of things that we bring up. Let's just talk about mini splits as an example of how can we do that better. Do we really want it all coming forward? Anyway, I'll let you summarize, and we just feel internally that we'd like to give the town board a little bit of encouragement to finish this up. As an example, there are uses not in this table that we might want to see in town. Nobody ever thought about distilleries in the past. Because it's not listed in the table of uses, we can't do it right now. So are there other things like that that we might want here, but because they're not identified, they're not allowed? So in 5 minutes or less, can you summarize your 28 pages?
I'll do less than 5. I mean, there are a number of them that I've been tracking over time as they get brought up. I've been working with Brian, identifying things. The most recent one that I actually just drafted and sent to him maybe 2 weeks ago was actually signage for Astor Square, where all the businesses are. So the signage there is constantly going to the ZBA, and it doesn't have to, but the signs that are allowed, are some of the signs that we talk about all the time, is just not adequate for commercial uses. So we provided an update to that. We sent to Brian, he'd like people to send to the town attorney, who will then send it to the town board to be considered for a resolution. It's kind of the process, we develop something, goes through the attorney, goes to that.
Use this because you're facing those guys and I can't hear you.
So the sign update for that is one of the ones that we've been looking at. Short-term rentals was another one. We started that one pre-COVID, and then, it went through a number of iterations, and then the town board did eventually take care of that. Hospitality use membership clubs is another one that we did a couple of years ago, related to some terms and definitions. We've done some other cleanup issues with portable accessory structures and tree houses and other things, just trying to clean up a lot of the stuff that constantly kind of gets dragged into things that don't necessarily need to come to the board, certainly don't need to go to the ZBA. So the code is really good. It's just that, as things change over time and as you start realizing what was written, sometimes there are unintended consequences and other things. So we've got lots of other things out there. I think, we've talked about the sign code on and off for a long time. I think the sign code needs a, overhaul. I think everyone agrees that that's the case. That is a bit of work, but that's something we wanted to look at. We've been looking at definitions. I've got, pages and pages of definitions that I think need to be updated, added, or changed, just because of things that have changed or maybe weren't there in the first place. Conference centers has been an issue that's been discussed on and off for quite a while that we actually don't really regulate particularly well in the code, so we need to take a look at that. And then there are other things, there are little minor things in the use table, and there, we've talked about, an art zone overlay and making sure that our code adequately and properly deals with replacement and manufacturing mobile homes. They're a protected class of land use, and our code doesn't really do a great job of dealing with that. Campgrounds, glamping, new technology that's coming in, wind turbines, solar panels, solar fields, a lot of that has been dealt with. Now we're dealing with battery storage issues, which I should decided on a 2-hour webinar on today. They're becoming a big one now, battery storage facilities. So there's a lot of stuff out there that's not even on my list. So we're constantly trying to keep on top of these things. There are a number of issues that have been around, kicking around, and I think a lot of them I've got ideas drafted, but I need to pull them into an actual, I need to pull them into the code format, and then we have to get a resolution drafted that has to be reviewed by an attorney, and then brought to the town board. So this has been kind of ongoing for a while.
Solar secret thing in there?
What's that?
Oh, we have to go to the secret every time it's solar?
No, that's just the way the secret's written.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's not even, okay.
Yeah, that's kind of out of our hands, the way the secret's.
So the idea is to send something to the town board suggesting that this is, really important and should be brought back to full attention by the board. So I would like to suggest that be separated from the 9G corridor.
No, it's a separation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
John, you want to add anything there?
No, other than I just, a lot of these are housekeeping kinds of issues that if they're brought to fruition, they're gonna make life easier for the planning board, for the zoning board of appeals, for citizens, who have to break open the zoning law and look at it and understand it and try to understand how it impacts whatever proposed project they're thinking of. So I think this is a great thing, and zoning laws have to be updated periodically, and we haven't had a big update, and so this really needs to get done.
Okay, so I'll have Jim draft something, I'll have him do something with this too, and circulate it, and then I'll take a look at it before the next meeting. I don't have anything else.
One brief question regarding the previous conversation. Is there a way to understand the cost? Because I think it's really easy for us all to stop here and be like, yeah, we should do all of this, right? But then not really understanding the cost, I think, is relative to it. And so, is there a way to
For a full quarter study?
yeah,
You can know.
Just back of the napkin, rough out of my head kind of thing. If I were to do the study of these quarter studies regularly, if I were to do a study from 199, which would include obviously studying what's happening on 199, but focusing on 9G from 199 down to Route 9, and obviously understanding what's going on at those intersections. I'd have to bring in a traffic engineer because they do the counts, they do the analysis. I need someone with a PE behind their name to do all that stuff. I can, but I don't have a PE, so I can't. It's 40, 50, 60 grand, depends on how far down you want to go and what the RFP says. It usually takes 8 to 10 months. It'll take a land use planner, it'll take an engineer to do the analysis. The 2 counts alone are thousands of dollars just to set them down and then pull the data. You got to get another firm usually to do those, and this is a larger engineering firm that has their own 2 counts.
So there's that, but the other, the zoning things, because that's going to involve other layers that we'll have to get in.
right?
But then you get into what I would say are sort of the offsets, like, not having all those things clear in the zoning law right now costs us money with Brian Tam, the zoning administrator who has to.
Of course, I'm just, I
Yeah.
think it is healthy though. I think there's a responsibility to,
Yeah,
I'd like the same thing when the costs are getting passed on to a
Exactly.
potential person that's looking at development. If there's significant costs related to this, and all these experts are paid for their expertise, I think it's healthy to at least have a gauge,
well, and interestingly enough.
so that I can plan my next business, obviously.
Well, there's some lots available. But, what we can bring to the table with some of this study is that we do have traffic studies that have been done for the villas and traffic studies that have been done for
Yeah.
newbies. So there's things that have been borne by applicants already that contribute to a better pool of information about that than we had in 2020. And that would be helpful to people.
And the zoning changes, a lot of it is to try and clean things up to make it easier.
You know, there's no need for a lot of these side variances to go to ZBA. We can clean a lot of that up with the proper sign code, for instance. That will take that out of the process. It'll free up the ZBA to focus on the bigger items, the more important items than these little signs that we're talking about.
People, to businesses.
Right, and it's a cost, it's absolutely a cost, and I understand that.
For everyone, it's
Yeah,
costing
right.
town, it's costing everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of work going on downstairs. I sometimes compare what's going on in this town, that's, you know, a small city. You know, a much more developed town. I mean, there's just an unbelievable amount of work that goes on in the basement downstairs with the building department, Gretchen and Brian. There's a lot of people that need to know.
And it's not getting,
It's not.
it's not reducing the amount of work that's coming through the offices downstairs or even before us. You know, we're planning more than once, twice a month, and typically has 4 new applications that we look at per time. It's not slowing down. And it's not going to slow down, as Denise says. We see, you know, all kinds of new proposals coming in. Some don't even make it as far as here because they fall off the radar, but the types of things that are being talked about are just off the charts in some regards.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about how all the easy land is gone. And so what's left presents challenges that we wouldn't have thought about before. And so the more clarity that we can provide in the zoning law, the easier it is for everyone, for the boards and for citizens. Because every time you go get a variance, you got to post an escrow deposit, and it's, you know, 3 months minimum to just go through the process. And so if the statute's clear and doesn't require a variance or an interpretation, it makes life easier.
I mean, there's a balance here, you know. You often hear people say, you know it in your line of business more than some, you know, people want to come to Rhinebeck because of the way it looks. And that's important when you look at other communities further south of us where these malls, strip malls have developed. You hear people talk like we don't want that. So without proactivity, you know, it might just happen by default in ways that we don't want it to happen. At least if we look at it, maybe we can manage change and manage development rather than to have it imposed on us in ways that we don't want.
I think in a lot of those communities, that's exactly how things happen, is that the communities lagged way behind what was happening on the ground, and then you end up being stuck with what's there.
Okay, well, I thank you all for your comments, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. I have a motion, second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? So I would say